Well, welcome back to our Sunday Bible study here at Transfiguration. We are reading from the 21st Sunday in Ordinary Time. The gospel I want to highlight here comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. And although the book of the prophet Isaiah is an interesting one for this week, we'll highlight it just very briefly. But this passage is really at the heart of a lot of what we believe as Catholics, as Roman Catholics especially, that Peter is our first pope. He was given this authority from Jesus himself. And we'll dive into it here. So Jesus is walking with his disciples, and along the way he asks them, "Who do men say that I am? Who do men say that the Son of Man is?" And they give some answers: Elijah, John the Baptist, Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets, which is kind of silly. You might just be one of these guys. You might be one of the prophets. And then he asks them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter responds, "You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One, the Son of the living God." So it's a twofold confession or profession from Simon Peter. And we say Simon Peter now because then Jesus says, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." So, Peter, you didn't come of this knowledge of your own. This is given to you by my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter. Now in English, Peter, we know that means Petros or rock. Jesus would have said Kephas. And on this Kepha, this gigantic rock, in Aramaic would have meant this gigantic rock. On this big rock, who you are now, I give you a new name, I will build my church. And this is meant to help us understand that Peter is the foundation of this church. He is the cornerstone of this church. And then he says, "I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." Jesus is making a promise that on this cornerstone and on this church, that the gates of this kingdom, this other kingdom, will not prevail against it. "And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Now, we also get this new imagery here as well from this passage. Not new imagery from the scriptures. Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven all the time in the parables. "My kingdom of heaven is like this. It's like a mustard seed." You know, all these wonderful images we get from the parables. Now Jesus says, "I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." Now this brings us back to the prophet Isaiah, where he takes away the authority from Shebna and gives it to someone else. Because they haven't really been faithful, they've been worried their entire time about building this temple, this tomb for themselves actually, and not giving their life over to God. So this symbol of taking authority from one and giving it to another is signified in the prophet Isaiah by giving on the keys. And actually there's some imagery that these keys might be quite large, maybe some type of yoke. But it is meant to be authority. This person is the prime minister. This person is the second in charge. This person is actually first in charge when the king is not in his kingdom. And this is meant to give us some understanding of who Peter is. And we see this played out in the Acts of the Apostles, that although Peter denies Jesus, it doesn't mean he's perfect. Just because he's given the keys to the kingdom of heaven and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, does not mean he's perfect. However, it does mean that God, through Jesus in God, is making this promise like he has of old. God is always making promises to us of his faithfulness, and his faithfulness through Peter will be that the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And he now is the vicar on earth. He now is the prime minister, the authority here on earth in place of Christ. So we understand this beautifully in our Catholic faith, that Peter is acting as the first pope. And we see this in imagery at the Vatican, where we see the keys, the Vatican flag, and the crest of the Pope has the keys of the kingdom. This is meant to signify the authority that he has here on earth. Now, it also, of course, does not mean that they are perfect in their life. But it does mean that God's promise is faithful. God's promise is always faithful, and he will keep us free from the prevailing of Hades, of hell. And he will keep us safe in this kingdom that he has created for us in heaven. And he wants us to be there. He wants us to be there. So ask this question this week. Who do you say that he is? And where do you give this authority? The last thing I want to say is this authority was not given to Peter out of any greatness. This authority was a gift. This was a gift to Peter. So it's not something that he can say, well, I confess this, so now that everyone else can confess it and we're given the same authority. No, that's not true. Jesus particularly changed his name from Simon to Peter, to Cephas, whatever translation you have or whatever language you're using. He is calling him, he's changed him, and he's given him a mission because of this. And this is a particular mission just for Peter. It's a particular mission for Peter and the successors of Peter that we see so clearly in our beautiful Catholic faith. So I ask you to continue to reflect on these readings. These are the source of a lot of debates between Catholics and Protestants. So there is more to read, of course. But continue to dive into the Bible. Find a Bible that you're going to read. Find a good commentary that you love. And dive into it more and more. I promise you, the more you learn about our Bible and the Word of God, the more you will fall in love with Him and fall in love with our church. God bless.